Pediatric respiratory chest x-rays are honestly one of the most confusing things during exams. Normal can look abnormal, small changes matter a lot, and one missed sign can completely change the diagnosis. But once you know what to look at first and what to ignore, pediatric chest x-rays actually become very doable. In this video, we'll go through some common and exam favorite pediatric respiratory conditions on chest x-rays using a simple step-by-step approach, exactly how you're supposed to do it in the exams. So whenever you're given a pediatric chest x-ray for a respiratory condition, don't jump to the diagnosis. Always start by identifying the view, assess the quality of the film, and then look at the airways, lung fields, and pleura in that order. Keeping this structure helps you stay calm and prevents missing obvious findings. So let's start with the first one. This is a plain chest x-ray of a child taken in the anterior-posterior AP view. The film appears to be adequately exposed and the cardiac size is within normal limits. On examining the lung fields, there are diffuse, bilateral, symmetrical opacities involving all lung zones. These opacities have a fine granular ground glass appearance, and some areas the lungs appear almost completely white out. There are air bronchograms extending peripherally which suggest alveolar filling with patent airways. Overall, there is reduced lung transparency, with blurring of the diaphragmatic and cardiac borders. Putting all these findings together, like bilateral symmetrical ground glass opacities, air bronchograms, and normal cardiac size, the chest X-ray findings are most probably suggestive of acute respiratory distress syndrome or ARDS. Now let's read this from our textbook. ARDS is defined as pulmonary edema not originating from the heart. The chief cause is severe pneumonia followed by sepsis. Predisposing factors include shock, tissue injury, aspiration, toxins, microthrombi, intravascular coagulation, uremia, and increased intracranial pressure. Pathogenesis. There is increased permeability of alveolar capillary membrane leading to aggregation of leukocytes in the pulmonary circulation. Mediators such as free oxygen radicals and platelet activating factors are released and injure the vascular epithelium. In the acute stage, there is edema and hyaline membrane formation, followed by fibrosis. Microthrombi in vessels contributes to increased pulmonary vascular resistance and right to left shunting. Clinical features. ARDS can occur at any age. Initially, symptoms are less and the lungs are clear. Later on, within 6 to 8 hours, patient becomes breathless. After 12 hours of insult, refractory hypoxia occurs, followed by hypercapnia. Radiologically, most lung fields are affected with reticular opacities. Mortality is very high, approaching 50 to 60%. Treatment. Patient should be managed in an intensive care unit ICU with cardiorespiratory monitoring and artificial ventilation. Ventilation is achieved by a high PEEP or inverse ratio ventilation. The cause of ARDS should be treated simultaneously. RDS is common in neonates of less than 34 weeks of gestation. The overall incidence is 10 to 15% but can be as high as 80% in neonates less than 28 weeks. In addition to prematurity, asphyxia, acidosis, maternal diabetes, and cesarean section can increase the risk of RDS. Etiopathogenesis. Surfactant production starts around 20 weeks of life and peaks at 35 weeks of gestation. Therefore, any neonate less than 35 weeks is prone to develop RDS. The primary abnormality is surfactant deficiency. Surfactant produced by type 2 alveolar cells comprises lipoprotein containing phospholipids and proteins. The surfactant prevents the alveoli from deflating at the end of the expiration by lowering the surface tension within them. In the absence of surfactant, the alveoli tend to collapse during expiration, and the neonate has to exert additional energy to open the collapsed alveoli again. Increased work of breathing and hypoxemia causes acidosis, which results in pulmonary vasoconstriction, right to left shunting across the foramen ovale, and consequent hypoxemia. Ischemic damage to the alveoli causes the transudation of proteins, forming a hyaline membrane. Clinical features. The onset of respiratory distress usually occurs within the first 6 hours of life. Clinical features include tachypnea, retractions, grunting, cyanosis, and decreased air entry. A chest X-ray depicts low volume lungs, reticular granular pattern, ground glass opacity, and air bronchogram. The lungs become white out and severe disease. Management. Such neonates need admission to the neonatal intensive care unit, IV fluids, and appropriate respiratory support. Continuous positive airway pressure, that is CPAP, is generally enough for mild to moderate disease. CPAP is a non-invasive modality of support where a continuous distending pressure of 5 to 7 cm H2O is applied at the nostril level to keep the alveoli open in a spontaneously breathing neonate. CPAP is an excellent respiratory support modality that minimizes lung injury, air leaks, and sepsis. Preterm neonates developing severe RDS often require mechanical ventilation. Preterm neonates are at risk of lung injury by excessive pressure and high oxygen. High oxygen saturation above 95% can contribute to development of ROP, that is retinopathy of prematurity, which can lead to blindness as discussed earlier. Exogenous surfactant replacement therapy is recommended as a treatment of choice for moderate to severe RDS. Though lung surfactants were initially manufactured synthetically, current surfactants are extracted from animal lungs. Natural surfactants such as bovine calves, beractant, or pigs, poractant, as opposed to artificial surfactants which lack surfactant proteins. Natural surfactants have surfactant proteins B and A, making the latter more effective. New synthetic surfactants with recombinant surfactant protein B are more effective than previous synthetic surfactants. SRT is indicated in preterm neonates with moderate to severe RDS. SRT can be given as a rescue therapy to treat established RDS or prophylactic therapy in neonates less than 28 weeks. SRT has a synergistic action with CPAP. A preterm neonate with respiratory distress is treated initially with CPAP. The SRT is administered if the RDS is severe enough to require FiO2 of 40% or greater while on CPAP. SRT decreases the duration and level of respiratory support in neonates and improves outcomes. Traditionally, the neonates were intubated, given surfactant in 4 or 5 boluses through an endotracheal tube, and later extubated after a few hours. Today's many neonates can now be intubated, given surfactant, and rapidly extubated. So that is INSURE, IN for intubated, SUR for surfactant, and E for extubated. Avoiding mechanical ventilation. Lately, giving surfactant using a thin catheter inserted in the trachea under vision has obviated the need for intubation, thus avoiding complications of intubation. Prevention of RDS. Antenatal steroids reduce RDS, intraventricular hemorrhage, and mortality in preterm neonates. This is a chest X-ray of a neonate. The lung fields show bilateral and symmetrical involvement. There are high volume lung fields suggestive of hyperinflation. There is prominent perihilar vascular markings with a streaky appearance. Air bronchograms are seen extending peripherally. The interlobar fissure appears prominent. The diaphragm and the cardiac borders are mildly blurred. There is no focal consolidation, no collapse, and no whiteout lung. Overall, the findings are suggestive of transient tachypnea of newborn, that is TTNB. Now let's read this from a textbook. Transient tachypnea of newborn is a benign self-limiting disease usually occurring in term neonates. Transient tachypnea of newborn is due to delayed lung fluid clearance leading to impaired gas exchange and hypoxia at birth. Elective caesarean section before 39 weeks of gestation and prematurity are major risk factors. These neonates have tachypnea, which is often silent without much respiratory distress. TTN is a diagnosis of exclusion after ruling out serious disorders like RDS and pneumonia. Chest X-ray may show high volume lung fields, prominent vascular markings, and a prominent interlobar fissure. Supportive treatment with oxygen therapy is often adequate, but some may need CPAP therapy. The prognosis is excellent. This is a chest X-ray of a neonate. The lung fields show bilateral, diffuse, heterogeneous, fluffy opacities. The involvement is patchy and asymmetric. There are areas of atelectasis alternating with areas of emphysema, suggestive of air trapping. The lungs appear hyperinflated. There is no uniform whiteout, and the opacities are coarse rather than fine. Features of air leak may be present, such as pneumothorax or pneumomediastinum, due to rupture of overdistended alveoli. Overall, the X-ray picture is consistent with meconium aspiration syndrome. Now let's read this from our textbook. Neonates born through meconium-stained amniotic fluid can aspirate the meconium into the lungs and develop respiratory distress, which is known as meconium aspiration syndrome, MAS. Aspirated meconium can block the large and small airways, causing areas of atelectasis and emphysema, which can result in air leaks like pneumothorax. Atelectasis and emphysema cause ventilation-perfusion mismatch that can progress to respiratory failure. Meconium also induces chemical pneumonitis. Clinical features and cause. Meconium aspiration syndrome usually occurs in term or post-term neonates that are often small for gestational age. Respiratory distress develops within a few hours and worsens in the next 24 to 48 hours. If untreated, the distress can progress to respiratory failure. The characteristic X-ray is shown here. Complications include pneumothorax, other air leak syndromes like pneumopericardium, pneumomediastinum, and hypoxia leading to persistent pulmonary hypertension. Management of MAS. Unnecessary disturbance in the neonate can cause worsening of PPHN. Such neonates need supportive care by providing thermal protection, IV fluids, and monitoring. Judicious use of oxygen, CPAP, and mechanical ventilation helps maintain oxygenation and ventilation. Some neonates may need inhaled nitric oxide to reduce pulmonary artery hypertension. With improved NICU care and ventilatory support, the mortality has reduced to 18 to 20% in severe MAS. The survivors have a high risk of developing asthma and childhood. So now let's move on to the next one. This is a chest X-ray of an infant. The lung fields show bilateral hyperinflation as evidenced by increased lung volumes. There is flattening of the diaphragm on both the sides. The lung fields show prominent perihilar markings with peribronchial thickening, giving a streaky appearance. Few patchy infiltrates are seen. There is no focal lobar consolidation and no pleural effusion. Overall, the radiological features are suggestive of small airway obstruction consistent with acute bronchiolitis. Now let's read this from the textbook. Acute bronchiolitis. It is one of the common serious acute lower respiratory infections in infants. Affected infants are between the ages of 1 and 6 months. But the disease can affect children up to their second birthday. Disease usually occurs in winter and spring. Respiratory syncytial virus, that is RSV, is implicated in most cases. Other causative organisms include parainfluenza virus, adenovirus, influenza viruses, and rarely Mycoplasma pneumoniae. Protection against RSV is mediated by antibodies of IgG3 subclass. These antibodies have shorter half-life and do not cross the placenta in substantial amount, so as to offer protection to the infant. High quantities of secretory IgA antibodies to RSV are present in the colostrum, and breastfeeding reduces the likelihood of an infant being hospitalized with acute bronchiolitis. Inflammatory mediators like leukotrienes also play a role in the disease. Pathogenesis. The inflammation of bronchiolar mucosa leads to edema, thickening, formation of mucus plugs, and cellular debris. Bronchiolar spasm occurs in some cases. The bronchial lumen, which is already narrow in the infants, is further reduced. As airway resistance is inversely related to the fourth power of radius of bronchiolar lumen, even slight narrowing causes marked increase in airway resistance and reduction of airflow during inspiration and expiration. During expiration, the bronchioles are partially collapsed and egress of air from the lungs is reduced, resulting in emphysematous changes. When obstruction becomes complete, the trapped air in the lungs may be absorbed, causing atelectasis. Due to diminished ventilation and diffusion, hypoxemia is produced in severe disease. In severely hypoxemic infants, retention of carbon dioxide leads to respiratory acidosis. In the milder cases, compensation occurs due to hyperventilation of normal alveoli. Clinical manifestations. The disease starts with an upper respiratory tract infection. After a few days, the breathing becomes fast and respiratory distress develops. Majority of the infants show mild symptoms and recover in 3 to 7 days. Those with severe disease may develop retraction of lower intercostal spaces and suprasternal notch on 3 to 5 days. In severe infection, the infant pants for breath and may appear cyanosed. The fever is moderately high. Accessory muscles of respiration are working. Expiration is prolonged. Fine crepitation and bronchi are auscultated. Breath sounds may be faint or inaudible in severe cases. Respiratory disease is out of proportion to the extent of physical signs in the lungs. As the air is trapped and the lungs leading to emphysema, the liver and spleen are pushed down. When the chest becomes overinflated, the anteroposterior diameter of the chest is increased, and the hyperresonance is noted on percussion. Investigations: X-ray chest shows hyperinflation and minimal infiltrates. The diaphragm is pushed down. The lung fields appear abnormally translucent. The leukocyte count is normal or slightly elevated. A rapid test using monoclonal antibodies against respiratory syncytial virus or nasopharyngeal aspirate can rapidly identify RSV. Course and prognosis: Bronchiolitis is generally a self-limiting illness. The symptoms subside in 3 to 7 days. Death may occur in 1% of severely ill patients due to respiratory failure. The relationship of bronchiolitis to bronchial asthma in later life has been observed in about one-fourth of the cases. Bronchial asthma is more likely in children with personal or family history of an allergic illness. Treatment: Treatment of bronchiolitis is essentially symptomatic. The child should be nursed in a humid atmosphere, preferably in sitting position at an angle of 30 degrees to 40 degrees, with head and neck elevated. Infants with mild disease can be cared for at home in a humidified atmosphere. If respiratory distress increases or feeding problems appear, the child should be hospitalized. In hospital, moist oxygen inhalation remains the mainstay of treatment. It is administered continuously even in the absence of cyanosis. Fluids and electrolyte balance should be maintained. Very sick infants may need a concentration of 60% oxygen given through a hood. Pulse oximetry should be performed and regularly keep oxygen saturation of more than 92%. Antibiotics have no role. Ribavirin, an antiviral agent, has no role in the treatment of infants who were previously healthy. Ribavirin, however, shortens the course of illness in infants with underlying congenital heart disease, chronic lung disease, and immunodeficiency. Ribavirin is delivered by a nebulizer 16 hours a day for 3 to 5 days in such cases. Bronchodilators, inhaled or systemic steroids, have not been found to be useful in infants with acute bronchiolitis. Similarly, inhaled epinephrine has not been found to give consistent benefits. If a patient shows improvement after first dose of bronchodilators or epinephrine, therapy may continue every 4 to 6 hourly. Initial evidence support use of inhaled hypertonic saline in infants without acute bronchiolitis. Continuous positive airway pressure (CPAP) or assisted ventilation may be required to control the respiratory failure. In severe cases, extracorporeal membrane oxygen is effective when respiratory failure is not controlled by mechanical ventilation. The term croup is used for a variety of conditions in which a peculiar brassy cough is the main presenting feature. Inspiratory stridor, hoarseness, or respiratory distress may not always be associated with croup. The diseases include acute epiglottitis, laryngitis, laryngotracheobronchitis, and spasmodic laryngitis. Acute epiglottitis due to infection with H. influenzae type B is less common but a more severe illness than croup. The incidence has been declined following improving immunization against Haemophilus. Patients usually 3 to 6 years of age present with acute sore throat, high fever, muffled voice, inspiratory stridor, marked dysphagia and drooling. Unlike croup, cough is usually absent. The patient looks toxic and prefers to sit in a leaning forward, that is tripod position, that helps them breathe better. Lateral neck X-ray reveals a characteristic thickening of the epiglottis, this is known as the thumbprint sign. Maneuvering of the oropharynx or larynx is not advised as it may precipitate fatal laryngospasm. Rapid airway management is crucial and includes intubation by skilled personnel or rigid bronchoscopy followed by tracheotomy. In atypical presentations, a skilled physician might try flexible endoscopy, which shows significant edema and erythema of the supraglottic structures, compromising the airways. IV cefotaxime or ceftriaxone are administered for 7 days. Now let's talk about the X-ray on the right of the screen. This is an X-ray of the neck AP view in a child. There is subglottic narrowing of the trachea producing a steeple sign. The narrowing is symmetrical and involves the upper trachea. The epiglottis appears normal in size. There is no prevertebral soft tissue widening. These radiological findings are suggestive of croup laryngotracheobronchitis. Now let's read this from the textbook. Laryngitis and laryngotracheobronchitis, infectious croup. These conditions are nearly always caused by viral infections, usually parainfluenza type 1. Other viruses incriminated include respiratory syncytial and parainfluenza type 2 and 3, influenza virus, adenovirus and rhinovirus. Bacterial etiology or bacterial superinfection is unusual. In infectious croup, the onset of illness is more gradual. Usually there is mild cough, cold, and a few days before the child develops a brassy cough and a mild inspiratory stridor. As the obstruction increases, the stridor becomes more marked and the suprasternal and sternal recession with respiration become manifest. Child with acute laryngotracheobronchitis should be assessed for severity of illness on the basis of general appearance, stridor, which is audible with or without stethoscope, oxygen saturation, and respiratory distress. Spasmodic croup. It occurs in children between the ages of 1 and 3 years. There may not be preceding coryza. The child wakes up suddenly in the early hours of the morning with a brassy cough and noisy breathing. The symptoms improve within a few hours. The illness may recur on subsequent days. The course is generally benign and patients recover completely. The cause is unknown. Humidification of the room in which the child is nursed is all that is necessary. Now let us look at this chest X-ray. There is homogeneous opacity seen in the lowest zone of the lung field on one side. The opacity has a smooth concave upper border forming a classical meniscus sign. The costophrenic angle on the affected side is obliterated. The lung markings are not visible within the opacity, suggesting a pleural rather than parenchymal pathology. In moderate to large effusions, there may be mediastinal shift to the opposite side, indicating a mass effect. The opposite lung field appears relatively clear. Overall, the radiological findings are consistent with pleural effusion. On this chest X-ray, one hemithorax shows an area of increased radiolucency. A thin, sharp visceral pleural line is visible, beyond which no lung markings can be seen. The lung on the affected side appears collapsed medially. In a large pneumothorax, there may be depression of the hemidiaphragm and mediastinal shift to the opposite side, suggesting a tension component. The opposite lung field appears normal. Overall, these radiological findings are consistent with pneumothorax. Let's move on to the next X-ray. On this chest X-ray, there is a well-defined cavity lesion seen in the left lung field. The cavity has a thick, irregular wall and shows a horizontal air fluid level within it. There is surrounding parenchymal consolidation in the adjacent left lung. The lesion is intrapulmonary and as suggested by its irregular margins and the absence of a meniscus sign. The right lung field appears normal. Overall, the radiological findings are consistent with a left-sided lung abscess. So now let us read this from the textbook. Lung abscess. Lung abscess in children is most frequently a complication of bacterial pneumonia, especially those due to Staphylococcal aureus and Klebsiella pneumoniae. It may also develop as a sequestration of lung tissue or in association with foreign bodies, bronchial cysts or stenosis. Staphylococcal lung abscesses are often multiple while those complicating aspiration are solitary. The abscess may rupture into the pleural space leading to pyoneumothorax. The main pathological changes are of necrosis and liquefaction with inflammation in the surrounding lung tissue. Clinical features. The patient has a fever, anorexia, lethargy, pallor and cough with foul-smelling expectoration. Physical signs may be minimal. Amphoric breath sounds, coarse crepitations and whispering pectoriloquy are characteristic but often not elicitable. The diagnosis is confirmed by plain X-ray film of the chest and ultrasound or CT scan of the chest. Treatment. Appropriate antibiotics to which the organisms isolated from the sputum or bronchoscopic aspirate are sensitive are administered for 4 to 6 weeks. Physiotherapy is carried out for effective drainage of the pus. Surgical dissection of the involved area of lung is indicated if medical therapy is not effective. And that wraps up part 1 of pediatric chest x-rays. From wet lungs to black lungs, from air leaks to air fluid levels, if you can describe these x-rays calmly and systematically, half of your pediatrics viva is already sorted. But we're not done yet. In part 2, we tackle the real exam troublemakers, that is, pneumonia and tuberculosis, where one wrong word can cost marks and one missed sign can change the diagnosis. So pause, revise, and come back for part 2 because that's where the real pattern recognition begins. Thank you for watching. Bye.